Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project, linked to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. I don't really know if I have anything to say. I think this part kind of speaks for itself. I've been so happy having an episode that's kind of just about Jack, because whenever Jack and Bake are together, Jack just has to play second fiddle to Bake, because Bake has to command every scene he's in, which by definition means that Jack really can't when he's with Bake. That's why I have to split them up so that Jack can do things. And this episode, he's not being crowded out by Bake or by Kay. He gets to take the spotlight, and I've been so pleased with it. But this is my favorite part of the three. I'm really excited. So, without further ado, this is Jack Acquires a New Coat, Part 3. What do you mean you know who the Ripper is? Aberline pulled Jack away from the crime scene and around the street corner. It could be anyone. No, actually, it couldn't. Jack was grinning. After how dour he usually was, it was frankly a little unnerving. Not just anyone knows we're investigating yet. Right, there's all the blokes we interviewed. Nah, it's not any of them. Look at this note again. Jack shoved the paper in her face. He tried to hide it, but don't this handwriting look familiar to you? She grabbed the paper, stared at it intently for a moment. Now that you mention it, it should. We just got done staring at it this morning. Aberline's eyes widened as the answers suddenly clicked into place. You don't mean... The autopsy reports, all written up by the coroner himself. Why in the bloody fuck didn't I think of that? She berated herself, a deep frown setting into her features. We were thinking butcher, maybe doctor... But a coroner would have just as much experience hacking up bodies. And everything else fits. He knew we've been investigating since this morning, and his office is right in the middle of Albus Cross. Truth be told, I thought he was a little odd. How do you mean? Even Jack looked a little uncomfortable. It was his sketches, of the oars. He kept touching them. You didn't notice? At the time, I was a mite overwhelmed by both the case and you. Who is this bloke, anyway? Aberline wasn't overly familiar, but she tried her best. His name is Dr. Arthur Druitt. He started out as a normal doctor, if I recall, but we were paying better than private practice. Do you think he was always like this? Jack shrugged. Only one way to find out. The fatigue of the day seemed to be catching up to even him, as he had to shake himself and blink a few times to keep his feet. Let's pay the Ripper a little office visit. Obviously, the lights in Druitt's office were off, and the door was locked. It was nearly midnight, after all. But locks didn't mean much to Jack. Aberline tried to argue that they weren't 100% sure he was the Ripper yet. Jack mostly ignored her and kicked the door in. Aberline readied her pistol. It was the first time on this job that she'd felt like she might have to use it, and she was hit with a disappointing intimation that it wouldn't be the last. Inside, the office was submerged in an inky blackness. They couldn't turn on the lights. They were technically breaking and entering, after all. So they had only the nearest street lamp outside to work with for light. On the far side of the room, the desk was covered in clutter. Aberline headed in that direction, hoping to get some evidence in writing, or at least more examples of his characteristic script. On top of the pile were a few autopsy reports, each several pages long. But wait a second. Aberline looked at the names, the drawings done by the constabulary's sketch artist. An elderly man, an alchemist's apprentice, a merchant's wife. Random. Entirely. These were not the Ripper's victims. And yet, they looked familiar. Aberline thought long and hard, before finally remembering. That's right. She'd seen that last body herself. The sight would probably never leave her head, the nearly hollowed-out corpse, the cackling thing more animal than man squatting over it. She could bring these images to mind more clearly than her own mother's face. These weren't just any bodies. They were Jack's. But why have these out now, a whole month after the last incident? Aberline had never mentioned Jack, and Druitt should have never met him as such, unless there was some other reason. "Aberline!" Jack called suddenly from across the room, and she jerked up at the sound. He had a small closet door open, and halfway inside he turned back around. "You'll want to see this." She approached the door, and didn't like how the interior seemed darker than it should have. Aberline opened the door all the way so that the streetlight would shine inward, and for a long time didn't say a single word. The inside was lined with shelves, and on those shelves, in neat little rows, were jars. It was difficult to tell just what was inside each of them. The contents were far too dark and murky, but the soft light from all the way across the room showed that each one was dyed a deep shade of maroon. Those are... Aberline could hardly get the words out. "Hearts, I'm pretty sure." Jack nodded. "Every single one." "But there must be at least 50 here." Aberline raised her voice in confusion. "Where by the saint's grace did he get all of the autopsies?" "Bloke's been taking hearts for years, looks like." While Aberline's stomach was busy doing somersaults, Jack just mostly looked impressed. "Probably ripped him right out in the middle of the autopsy, sewn him right back up like nothing was missing." Despite her stomach, Aberline was having a hard time taking her eyes off those jars. Each was adorned with a handwritten label. All that was written was a last and first name. "I think you were right about the escalation." "Yeah, except it's been happening for years. Murder was the escalation." "But the way you described it, escalation occurs due to repetition. Yet he'd been doing the same thing for years without so much as a pause. Why suddenly change now?" "Couldn't tell ya." Jack shrugged, but then turned as something at the back of the closet caught his eye. On the very center of the furthest shelf, one of the jars was empty. Aberline followed him, and together they squinted to read the label. Jack looked a little shocked, but Aberline immediately understood. For the name on that label, written in that now familiar, loopy hand, was Aberline, Adela. Though Jack opened his mouth to say something, Aberline spotted something that had been tucked underneath the jar and didn't let him say anything. "Look, a note." She opened it, and they both read it silently. "Come to the roof of the Hall of Justice at 1 a.m. Come alone. If you bring the girl with you, you know where her heart ends up." Another moment of pause for the both of them. "I thought," Aberline said finally, "I thought that note must have been for me." But it wasn't Aberline the Ripper wanted to see. It was Jack. The Hall of Justice was pretty funny, in a way. It had been built only 10 years ago, and while the front was a marvel of architecture done in the classical style, all marble columns and lion statues, the back looked just like any other building in the city. Back here it was flat and square and made of bricks. It even had a plain old metal fire escape. They probably saved a lot of money doing it that way. Aberline thought there had to be a metaphor in there somewhere, but she had never been good at those. Upon arrival, they'd found all the entrances locked. Of course they were, middle of the night as it was, so that left the question of how they, or Druitt for that matter, was supposed to get in. They still had a good while before the appointed time, however, so they figured they'd cross that bridge when they got to it. For now, it had been a very long day, and so they sat on the chiseled marble steps at the front, smoking a cigarette and watching as a light dusting of snow started to fall. "You know," Jack said, his breath a combination of the cheap cigarette smoke and the chill in the air, "I thought the Ripper sent a pretty clear message back in his office, yet here you are, right as rain, not a nerve in you." "I'm a constable," she chuckled. "I can't let something like one little threat scare me." Besides, it'd be idiotic to let you wander off on your own.
Oh, I can't tell if you're brave or just stupid.
She sighed as he passed her the cigarette. If I'm honest, probably the latter.
Sometimes you need to be, to keep going on this bitch of an earth.
Aye. Aberline took a long drag, considering something. Jack observed her face.
Ah, now that I've brought it up, you finally get the jitters, eh?
He grinned, but she shook her head. No, that's not it. She passed back the cigarette.
It is curious, though.
Jack pontificated.
Why you in specifics? Can't be just 'cause you're after him. Don't think he works like that. You're a stand-up woman of the law. Not really his normal type.
You're wrong about that. She sighed.
About what?
He paused, with the cigarette halfway to his mouth. I'm actually exactly his type. Jack still looked confused. I got this job only a week before we brought you in, right? Well, up till then I was no better than any of his victims. Jack tilted his head.
You was a whore?
She nodded hesitantly. 2 of those girls are my friends.
So that's why you're so desperate to put the Ripper behind bars.
He trailed off, staring somewhere off into the middle distance. What is it?
Nothing. It's just... You already reminded me of her.
Huh? He seemed to struggle with himself a little, and his expression was complicated. A bit angry, a bit guilty, maybe a little sad. It made him seem almost human.
I had a sister,
he said finally.
Our parents died. I was all she had. I had to go far away for work. Sent her money every month.
But you said had.
Something happened, and she was forgotten. Later, I learned that she'd ordered herself out just to survive. All because of me.
Huh. Aberline shook her head, and when Jack tilted his in response, she explained, That was not the sob story I expected from you.
What were you expecting?
Something more along the lines of, my father beat me and now I kill to feel alive.
That's a fucking penny dreadful plot.
You belong in one regardless. You're a strange one, Mr. Steele. His demeanor suddenly changed. He stiffened, his gaze hard.
Don't call me that.
He almost growled.
That man died a long time ago.
He flicked the butt of his cigarette somewhere away to land in the snow. So it's just Jack, then?
Aye. Just Jack.
Somewhere in the distance, the cathedral bell began the sluggish process of reaching the entire city with its deep, mournful tones. Aberline stood now, too, counting out the chimes. It was time. She glanced around, and her eyes widened as she caught the flicker of a lantern in one of the upper floor windows. Jack followed her gaze and stared at that light himself. And then he took off, nearly ramming into her in the process. But to Aberline's surprise, he wasn't running towards the front entrance, but rather around the side. Unfortunately, he got a couple-second head start before she realized what was happening and chased after him. By the time she scooted around the corner, she was already too late. Jack had shimmied up the fire escape and was wrenching up the ladder behind him.
Sorry, Aberline,
he called down, waving lazily.
You're gonna stay right down there, not getting in the way.
What are you going to do? He leaned over the railing, grinning horribly.
I'm gonna fucking kill him.
No! Aberline shouted back, but he was already gone and through the window. She reached for her holster, though she had no idea what she would do with her gun when she drew it. Except as she felt around, her stomach dropped as it hit her. Her gun wasn't there. It had been there when she'd sat down on the steps, she was sure of it. Her eyes widened. When he had run into her, Jack must have grabbed her gun. Bloody fucking prick! The window at the top of the fire escape was unlocked, and beyond it, Jack found himself on the top floor. It was mostly offices up here, not really for the general public, so it was respectable but a little cramped. But there was no time to waste. Jack found the nearest stairwell and took them two at a time. At the top, the door to the roof was also unlocked. Jack had the distinct feeling this had all been planned for. He didn't like it. The roof was pretty emblematic of the rest of the building. In the center was a large dome with a flagpole at the top that one could see from the street below, but it was surrounded by simple concrete. Above, the snow still fell gently, eagerly sticking to the cold surface. Jack's boots crunched through the thin layer as he took his first few calm steps forward. Through the snow, he saw the shadow of someone on the far side of the dome.
"I hoped you would come,"
said that same shadow. He took a few steps forward, revealing that same gaunt, bespectacled face that Jack had first seen just this morning. Jack stuck his hands in his coat pockets. The wind whipped fiercely up here.
"You panicked once you saw we was investigating. Should have had someone else write the note at least, or written it with your other hand."
"You're right," Druitt laughed. "I didn't even think about the fact that you'd seen my handwriting just this morning."
"Extensively. At that. But you realized your mistake just in time to set up this little rendezvous, eh?"
"I cut it close," he admitted.
"There is something I'm still confused about, though."
Jack scratched his head.
"Why try to scare Aberline off? She may be a constable, but you have to know that I'm much more dangerous than she is."
"I wanted to meet you."
"Pardon?"
"I should hope you know by now how long I've been doing this for," Druitt explained, smiling a little.
"Thieves, whores, back-alley alchemists, and the horrid twisted things they have left behind, they have all graced my autopsy table. Each and every one a lying, cheating, terrible individual. They didn't need their hearts, didn't deserve them, even. So I took them. Most of them were burned after I'd seen to them anyway." "So what changed?"
"What do you mean?"
"You had it all figured out. Why endanger that? Why start going after live ones?"
"Why, you. Of course." Jack looked confused. "I performed the autopsies on every one of your victims." The smile on his face was getting a little too wide. One even still had her face, if I recall. She looked almost remorseful in death, like she had finally understood her own sins. And I realized then that I knew why you did what you did. Some people don't deserve to live. They cause more evil by being alive than that caused if they were removed. You are the one who purges them. I was almost disappointed when you were caught. I was honestly rooting for you, but there was nothing I could do. Or so I thought. After much debate, I decided that it would be for the best for me to take up the work in your stead.
I'm sure you were fucking surprised when it turned out I was the one trying to catch you.
Coerced into it, I'm sure, by that filthy whore. People like that don't change. She wanted to use you to take all the credit for herself. Still, it worked out in the end. It gave us a chance to speak face to face.
Aye.
Jack nodded, noting a change in the air. Unfortunately, you were also one of those who cause more evil than you're worth. From his coat, Druitt pulled out an immaculately shiny scalpel. Now that I'm here, you're not needed anymore. So I'll have to kill you, too. Don't worry, I'll keep your jar on my desk. I respect you too much to lock it away in the dark with the others. Jack shook his head, smiling a little. But a second later, it fell off his face as he met Druitt's gaze.
No, I don't think so.
He pulled the pistol out of his pocket, aimed, and fired. The sound ricocheted around the roof, and Druitt fell backwards, his eyes widening in shock. Jack had only hit his shoulder, but the man clearly wasn't used to pain, for he writhed around wretchedly.
You know why I do the things I do?
Jack stood over him, pinning him to the ground with a steel-toed boot.
Because I have to. If I don't, I'll just lose whatever fucking little bits of my soul are left. Sobs like you, the righteous who kill for whatever divine fucking purpose your sick mind has come up with to excuse you. You disgust me. I thought I might be able to have some fun with you, off someone who deserves it for once. But taking it all slow like, I'm not gonna give you the fucking satisfaction.
No, wait, he pleaded. But Jack just smiled.
What? Don't want to die? I thought people who caused more evil than they're worth don't deserve to live. Oh, did you think you didn't count?
Druitt looked terrified. Served him right. Although Jack knew, of course, that he really wasn't any better. At least he knew what he did was terrible. So he aimed the gun and fired again. Right into Druitt's skull. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Below him, he was starting to hear a commotion. Of course, the gunshots must have alerted everyone in the immediate area that something was amiss. Jack glanced over the side of the roof, only to see Aberline organizing the inspectors and patrolmen who had started to gather below. Sensing someone's eyes on her, she looked up, their gazes meeting for just a moment. She must have noticed the blood on his cheek. Their pact was finished. The case was solved. Aberline nodded at him. Jack was a free man, for better or worse. His gaze roved around the roof, and seeing another close enough, he leaped over to it. Although how he was actually going to get down from here, he had no idea. In the end, Aberline got a commendation for her work, and all the credit. It made her a little uncomfortable, if she was honest, but she hoped that someday she'd be able to be praised for her own work. But at the end of the day, the rest of Albus Cross's numerous whores were safe from being brutally murdered for just trying to survive. And ultimately, that's why Aberline had taken the job in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She was far too familiar with what that was like. All of this celebration was undercut by the fact that somehow, that very same night, a dangerous inmate had managed to escape from the constabulary's holding cells. A few of his cellmates claimed to have seen exactly what happened, but of course they were just trying to cover for him. Why would an inspector of the yard simply let a crazed madman walk free? Bloody ridiculous notion. Jack did intend to leave Victoria, and the whole of Rafton, really, immediately, as he said he would. He really did. But for some reason, in that hour just before dawn, he found himself wandering those odd little side streets no one usually would want to find themselves at this hour, probably because of people like him. Maybe he was trying to work off the last of his energy from the encounter with Druitt. He'd been denied his fun, after all. Maybe he was just looking for the excuse. As these things tend to go. He quickly found one. Rushing down the street just ahead of him was a very familiar coat. It was attached to a man hurriedly writing something down on a notepad. What was his name again? Lunk? No. Lusk. That was the bastard. A reporter, he'd said he was. No doubt he'd found his way to the Hall of Justice and was now running back to try to get the story in the evening paper. Jack stepped in front of him, and Lusk nearly ran straight into him. "My apologies, he mumbled, before looking up from his notepad to see Jack's face. "Oh, it's you! I'm surprised to not find you at the scene, as it were." He hesitated for a second, before an idea seemed to strike him. "Your partner was a little frazzled, so I didn't get a chance to speak with her. Would you maybe mind giving a little interview?"
Cool. Why not?
Jack laughed in a way that Lusk clearly found unpleasant, because he shivered slightly at the sound.
In fact, I can even show you exactly how he did it.
Okay. Maybe it wasn't exact. Jack admitted that he did things a little out of order, because how was he meant to illustrate if Lusk was dead by step 1? He took his time explaining, too. He was awfully proud of how he'd figured it out, after all. At the end of it, Jack decided that, well, ultimately a good change of pace, the Ripper's method was not for him. It was too painless, Jack had already escalated way beyond basics like that. He looked over and groaned. He'd tried to keep a little tidy, but while he'd been musing, blood had begun to leak out of the gaping hole in the body's chest.
Fucking hell, he spat. That's a nice fucking coat.
Jack ripped it off the body to examine it. It was black, and he'd caught it in time that not too much blood had sunk into it. It really was a nice coat, if a little worn. One of the sleeves had clearly been patched near the elbow, but the collar was fur-lined, and it looked much warmer than whatever the fuck he had now. He tried it on, and it fit perfectly. For a few seconds, he admired his new acquisition, but then paused. He'd just given a thought to what he was doing. It was so absurd that he had to laugh at himself. But it really was a nice coat, and that corpse certainly wasn't going to need it anymore.
Sorry, Aberline.
He still had one or two little chuckles left in him.
I didn't keep my end of the bargain, but just think of it as a little parting gift from me to you, eh?
And so, before anyone had a chance to stumble upon what would inevitably become the biggest unsolved case of the last few years, Jack dipped his finger into some of the still dripping blood and began to make a door.